Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Canada Laws Let's Learn podcast. Today, we're learning about drug laws and the several different components within drug laws. So let's have an overview of what will be covered in this episode. We'll be talking about what drug laws are, what drugs are listed under this law, the history behind drug laws, what drugs were once legal, what are psychedelics and psychoactive drugs, how have laws changed, and how will they continue to change. We'll also talk about the legalization of marijuana, so let's get started. Now, what are drug laws? Well, drug laws are regulations that prohibit the use and control of drugs. So why do we prohibit drugs? We prohibit the use of drugs that are psychedelic and psychoactive because they're proven to damage families and children, and because the state of mind that wasn't theirs was feeling it. Drugs are also illegal because, while maybe sometimes it is for good reasons and does good, like for pain relief or like treatment, like some schizophrenic people used drugs and stuff to lessen their symptoms. But what are psychoactive and psychedelic drugs, and what is the difference between the two? Basically, depending on the drug you're taking, you'll have a trip. But drugs and their trips differ. So we have two categories called psychedelic and psychoactive. Psychoactive essentially means to affect the mental processes, which is speaking, memory, attention span, thought process, and your emotions, whereas psychedelic means to have or generate drug-induced hallucinations and a distorted make-believe of what reality is and isn't. Now, the drugs that are listed under this law are cocaine, heroin, LSD, shrooms, ecstasy, meth, codeine, ketamine, fentanyl, bath salts, and many opioids. That's a long list. Okay, so the history of drugs. Sit back and relax for this one. Let's go all the way back to the 1900s, a fine time for drug use. 1908 is a year, and Vancouver is a place where the first ever draw. 1908 was the year, and Vancouver is the place that the first ever drug law was made in. It banned opium, which was being used regularly at the time. The uses of it were for pain relief, which is a major reason for its use. Along with this opium ban, called the Opium Act, tobacco, alcohol, and many different medicines were well on their ways to regulation. We all know about the alcohol prohibition. We all know about the alcohol prohibition period, but this was another cherry on top to start shaping the society into something that was morally and politically correct. Cocaine was later added into the Opium and Drug Act of 1911, and then in 1923, Cocaine was later added into the Opium and Drug Act of 1911, and then in 1923, marijuana was added as well. The ban of opium was strongly rooted in Chinese racism because they wanted another reason to get Chinese people out of the country because a lot of people hated Chinese people. The ban was deeply supported because of this, and people even begged for BC to become a white populated place only. So people began villainizing it and realizing it went against God, which was like another reason why they didn't like drugs. It was kind of an excuse when it was really just Chinese racism. But drugs are frowned upon today because of this. They weren't really concerned if it was an addiction or if it was for criminal addiction. Today, the marijuana legalization was a huge change in drug laws. This happened in 2018, and since then, more restrictions come down on marijuana users. Now you can purchase weed in dispensaries, which are legal, but if you are found high and driving, you could get in a lot of trouble, even though alcohol kills more than weed. Anyways, that's enough about drug laws today. Again, enjoy this episode of Canada Laws Let's Learn. Stay tuned for next week. Goodbye.